You are listening to last month's Patreon Party People podcast, which goes up for free on a 1-month delay. If you would like to listen to the most recent podcast the moment it goes live, simply visit patreon.com/blazehedgehog and pledge $1 a month or more. You can now also make a one-time donation, and anyone who makes a one-time donation will instantly unlock the current month's podcast for everyone. All you have to do is visit patreon.com/blazehedgehog, and don't forget, Blaze Hedgehog is written like one word. Once again, that's patreon.com/blazehedgehog. Hello and welcome to the March, what day is it? I should have probably checked the date before I actually started this. Welcome to the, March 12th edition of the Patreon Party People podcast. I'm, of course, your host and purveyor of this Patreon, Ryan Bloom. I would like to apologize for how late this podcast is this month. The February podcast went out super late because I was sick that month. This month is a little bit different. The reason why this one is late is because, so normally how I schedule these podcasts to go up is that once Patreon pays me out, at the start of the month, they take money from you, the patrons, and then they put it kind of into a Patreon, almost like escrow service or something. Basically, Patreon holds on to the money. And then once all the money is collected, they pay me that amount of money. And according to the website, that usually happens around the 5th of every month. And for whatever weird, bizarre reason, Patreon collected all the money for the month and then didn't pay me any. It just was sitting there in Patreon. I had to go in and manually click the payout button to get my money. And usually the payout is like my reminder to say, okay, it's time to do the podcast. The money's here. It's kind of like the check clearing in a way. Usually that's been my schedule ever since I started this podcast like a year and a half ago at this point. I think we're up to I tagged all the podcast episodes on Patreon itself, patreon.com/blazehedgehog for those of you listening to the YouTube version of this. That'll be April? I went through and I tagged all the podcasts. I think we're up to the 16th or the 17th podcast by now. So, we're talking a year and a half roughly. But, just that money never came through, which means I never really thought about doing the podcast, because I wait on that constantly. That's my thing. We're broadcasting again here from the weird closet tent again. I thought last month's podcast sounded fine to me. My cousin, Matt, former patron, he said he didn't think last month's podcast sounded very good, and I don't really know what he was talking about in that respect. It sounded perfectly fine to me. I didn't hear any echo, so from this point forward, I think this weird podcast tent in my closet in my bedroom is how we're going to be recording these things from here on out. That's not as far as a solution for pre-recorded things like this podcast, that's fine. But as far as streams and everything go, that's not really a solution. I'm still going to have to record in my bedroom where it's super echoey and everything, but we'll cross these bridges when we get there. Obviously I'm not live streaming yet. In fact, there's a debate on whether or not I can even live stream. I have the bandwidth for it, but it's a tiny apartment and I do live with someone else. So, I'm the kind of person that's really picky about background noise. So if you could hear a TV in the background, if you could hear, general other person's sounds, that's not something I'm a super big fan of, but we'll get there when we get there. I do plan on at least trying to stream at some point once I get my computer set up, but we'll get to that later. I'm just reading off my notes here. Okay, first big point on the list. I think it was sometime in February's podcast, I said the sequence of events was I needed to put together my desk, and then once I had my desk, I could build my computer. About 3 or 4 days after that podcast went up, I built my desk. It took a long time and probably the most manual labor I've done in a while. Well, that's not true. Moving into this apartment was a lot of manual labor. I had to haul a lot of boxes up this flight of stairs to get into here. But I had my brother helping me. I don't know. Point is, it took a long time to put together that desk. I think I calculated it. We started at like 2 p.m. on a Friday, and we did not finish until 9 or 10 or maybe even 11 o'clock at night. So you do the math on there. That is like 8 hours, 7 hours, 6 hours. It took a very long time to put together that desk. But it is a very nice desk. This is kind of a weird thing. It smells nice. I guess I'm so used to the old desk we had back in Colorado that was, 22 years old or 23 years old or whatever. The smell of a new desk, I've never really had that. I haven't had that in a while. And this is kind of like a cherry finish, so it's also it smells, kind of like dark cherry wood. It's a nice smelling desk, especially so I'll walk into my bedroom here and it'll be like, oh, what's that smell? And then it's like, I think about it for a minute and it's like, oh, that's the desk. Which is, opposed to other smells, which I'm not really used to. So I've talked about the mess back in Colorado. We lived in this super old farmhouse from I'd say early 1900s at least. And it needed a lot of maintenance. We lived there for 24 years. The people before us lived there for 18 years. And I don't think the landlords really replaced a lot of stuff when we moved in. They promised us a lot of things for that old farmhouse. They promised us new weather stripping. They promised us new grass. They promised us new linoleum in the kitchen. They promised us all this stuff and they never did it. So by the time we got out of that old farmhouse, it was literally falling apart. And this is a roundabout way of saying that I never really had to open any windows. What's really gotten me about my brother's place and now this apartment is how the rooms get stuffy. If you don't open a window, they just kind of feel really sweaty and murky, and they kind of start to smell funny because, food smells and things like that, they get trapped in the room and they never leave. And that's weird to me because in that old farmhouse, we had a door. It was a back room. It was a combination laundry room, but it was also where we set up the computer. It was, this really big, almost back porch space. And it had a door leading outside, this really old, crummy door it was falling off the hinges when we moved in. And at some point, it literally did just fall off the hinges to where, you just kind of propped it up against the door frame and that's how the door closed. So something we ended up having to do in the farmhouse was kind of insulate it by hand. We'd get a bunch of plastic bags from, a supermarket or Walmart or something, and we'd pack them in around the door frame so that, in the winter, Colorado winters, the cold air wouldn't come rushing in through that room. And it kind of worked, but it also kind of didn't. You'd wake up some mornings to around the door frame, this little bit of snow came inside the house. That's the state of this farmhouse that we were living in. It was terrible. In retrospect, I think about that place. This is probably better served for the video I wanted to do about, moving from Colorado to Nevada. But it's one of those things where you live there for so long, you grow up there. You start out living there as this little kid, this little 8 or 9 year old child, and you don't really have a perspective about the world, let's say. You don't really have, as you grow up, one of the things as you mature is that you developed an ability for critical thinking, let's say. When you're 8 or 9, 10 years old, you don't really think too critically about the world. You don't really think about, this house sucks or whatever. It's a place you are. That's the way it is. You just deal with it. And as you grow up, there's like this weird thing where unless you get away from it for a while, you never really view it that way. So living in that old farmhouse, I didn't want to leave, but the further distance I get away from it, the more I'm starting to realize like just how bad that place really was, because now it's kind of like I'm finally seeing it with adult eyes for the first time. I don't have this super outdated view of a 10-year-old looking at this place as like, oh, this is just the way things are. It's crappy because I can't change it, that sort of thing. So, this all ties back to like, now we have apartments with proper insulation. You close a door and it's almost like you seal yourself in the room where, not much airflow gets through the doors. And, you come into a room and it's like, oh, I had dinner in this bedroom like 4 hours ago and now it smells like old food and you have to open a window and I'm not used to that. But now, I walk into this room and it's like, oh, what's that smell? Oh, it's my desk. My desk smells very nice. Oh, that was a tangent and a half, wasn't it? Where am I even in these notes? So building that desk also taught me something about, I mentioned, I think it was last podcast or maybe January's podcast, about why I went ahead and I bought a brand new full price desk instead of, going to a thrift store and whatever. And putting together made me realize why these kind of desks never really show up at thrift stores. And that's because they're built to just go together one way once. Like, they're not really built to be moved anywhere. They're not really built to be disassembled, especially. They have these things in them called, like, hidden cams. Okay, so I mentioned we had that desk back in Colorado. It was this giant desk. It was probably twice the size of the one I have now. And my mom built that. And, she built it herself, by herself. And from what she's told me about building that desk, it was all traditional nails and screws and things like that, because this was like 1997, 1998. So, it was just traditional construction in a lot of ways. Putting this desk together, she helped me because, she was so confident in her building abilities that she was like, oh, if I help you build this desk, it'll be sturdy forever. It'll never come apart. So I figured, whatever. She can help me build it. And she noted, as we were building the desk, that this desk seems to be constructed in such a way that you're never supposed to take it apart. It's not really too many nails and screws. It's these things called hidden cams. It's like this little metal pin that slots into pre-drilled holes on the MDF. That's like multi-density fiber or something like that. But you put these pins into these pre-drilled holes, and then everything just kind of slots together like in these tabs, like almost like cardboard. And then these cams are like these flat, not very like tall screws with like these hooks on them. And the pins slot into the cams, and then you tighten the cams so that the pins can't ever come back out again. And the cams are such that once you put a cam in, you can't ever take it back out again because it actually physically like screws into the wood. That's how it all holds together, as these hooks kind of dig into the particle board and they're never supposed to come out. Unless, you could probably take it all apart and then reassemble it again with wood glue, but that creates a whole different like set of problems for later on down the line. If you ever want to like take it apart again, then you have to deal with wood glue, and that stuff probably also never comes out. But basically the lesson I learned is that these desks are not made to be sold. They're not made to be transported. Once you put them together, they are fixtures of that room until you move out, and then you just kind of throw it away. They're designed to kind of be disposable in a sense. I mean, I suppose we'll get to something later on here in this podcast, but I think like within the state, let's say, if I ever moved, somewhere else in Nevada, I would definitely take this desk with me. I don't want to spend another $150 on a new desk and spend all night putting it together like I did this time. But, as far as like big moves cross country, this isn't really something that you ship with you. It's kind of designed to be disposable, like I said. But it's a good desk. I like the desk. It's amazing how much closer to home it feels when I have a desk. When I have, drawers to put things in, when I have shelves to align with all my dumb action figures and amiibo and things like that. It really does kind of, the comfort factor increases by like 100, let's say. It's pretty good. I like the desk. The only thing I don't really like, well, for starters, like I said, the old desk was a lot bigger. It was almost twice as long as the current desk, I built just now, which means there was more storage for stuff. The desk we left behind in Colorado had like a cabinet, it had a filing drawer, it had a different drawer for, pens and pencils and things like that. It had like a printer tray kind of thing. There was a lot of space to put stuff on that desk. And, it would have been really nice to take that desk with us, up to Nevada here, but it wouldn't have fit on the truck for one thing. So, and again, it would have been like 280 pounds, 300 pounds, and getting that thing up the stairs would have been impossible. But the other thing is something I'm really starting to notice about this desk. I don't have my computer set up in it yet, but I wanted a keyboard tray. And just to test it out, I took the keyboard that I use my computer with, and I put it on the keyboard tray, and the keyboard itself fits. But because the old desk was wider in Colorado, the wider desk, I had room for a keyboard and a mouse on the keyboard tray. The keyboard tray in my desk now, the one I just built, there's only room for the keyboard, which obviously presents a little bit of a problem, because that means that now, if like, I'm not going to say if I want to use my mouse, when I want to use my mouse, it has to be setting on like the desktop itself. It has to go above my drawer, which means the hand for the keyboard and the hand for the mouse are going to be at two separate elevations, which is going to be like super weird. I'm not used to that. And also with having my mouse up on my desktop like it is now, next to my laptop, I have carpal tunnel syndrome, and I'm starting to really feel the elevation. I have my chair, my computer chair, my office chair, up as high as it will go. And, I have to reach pretty far still to reach my mouse. And it's actually starting to hurt my wrist a little bit, having to angle my hand the way it is to actually use the mouse on my desk. So that's a hurdle I'm going to have to overcome. I'm thinking, maybe a TV tray next to the desk will be fine, but that's more furniture still. I have the desk and I have a table next to it, so then I also have a TV tray next to it. It's starting to get a little ridiculous at that point, and that's going to give me even less room because, I have this little cove set up, and I don't want to complain too much because, like I said, I do like the desk, but this is something difficult that I'm going to have to sort out. Talking with my mom again a little bit, she said that they sell like these clip-on mouse mats for your computer chair, your office chair. It kind of clips onto the armrest a little bit. I might look into that. That sounds weird to me and like kind of cheap, but we'll see what happens, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. I have like wrist rests that, not even necessarily like wrist rests, like those Velcro wrist guards for using computer software. I guess they're like carpal tunnel braces or something. I have a couple of those, and I've tried putting it on with the mouse. We'll see how it goes. But that's a little bit of a bummer with, how cool and how much I like my new desk. From the desk, again, I said I had a table. I put together the table. That's where my TV and eventually my computer, my desktop tower will go. I bought some really cheap plastic shelves from Walmart for $40. I don't know how long those are going to last, but I built those and I put those in the corner of my bedroom to just put boxes and stuff on. My room is, we'll say, probably about 90% set up at this point. I have all my tables, I have all my shelving, I have the PS4, the Xbox 360 hooked up. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Things are getting to a point where my room is, we moved in here in November, it's March, but it's almost complete. The only thing I'd really think, besides putting together my computer, is putting posters up, I guess, but I'm going back and forth on whether or not I want to actually put posters up. Just being the guy at 34, almost 35 years old, a bedroom covered in video game posters, I don't know. But at the same time, it's like, I really like my posters. I've got some pretty cool posters I want to put up. I was getting real tired of my bedroom in Colorado. Some of those posters had probably been up for 15 years at that point. And, I didn't go out and buy new posters or anything. But I do have posters that have sort of accumulated over the years that I never put up. So I'm kind of excited to put those up. I have an X-Files poster that I really liked. I think it was from the first movie. There was, I've been trying to think about what event it was. Noah Copeland, a staff at tssenews.com, he went to... It wasn't E3, I don't think. He went to some Sonic Mania panel. I think it might have been Sonic Boom, come to think of it. And that's where he picked up the Sonic Mania introduction manuals, which, we got probably 10 of those. Staff got a bunch of them. Tristan gave out a bunch for contests. I almost said costumes. But he also scored a bunch of those really nice Sonic Mania posters. And that actually ended up getting delivered to my house in Colorado probably about a week before we moved. It was really late June. So I've been kind of sitting on that poster for a while and I want to put it up. But it's also just one of those things where it's do I want to put posters up? Do I want to get new posters? Do I want to put the old posters back up? And it's just, they're sitting right here in the closet with me. I could probably reach over and grab them right now. Not that any of you could, really see them, but like I said, I have an X-Files poster. I have a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the movie poster. I have a poster for Encino Man. There's posters. Patron got me many, many years ago. What is it? Oh, I almost said Optimus Prime. It's, Megatron from Transformers. I don't know why I was thinking Optimus Prime. And a Simpsons poster, Bart at the chalkboard. I got to figure out which ones I want to put up. I got to figure out if I want to put them up. I bought some that sticky tack stuff specifically for posters so I wouldn't have to deal with nails or push pins, things like that. So, it's just, got to figure it out. Gotta finish unpacking. There's still probably one more load of stuff we got to get out of my brother's. I think I mentioned this before. It's an end table. It's our portable chest freezer. Well, it's not really portable, but it's a chest freezer. There's a toolbox my mom wants. Things like that. That's the last load. And that end table, that goes here in my bedroom. Right now I have my old CRT television. I got it. Gosh, I was in high school when I got that television. And that's what I play all my old retro systems on. That's what the PS2 gets hooked up to. That's what I had my Saturn hooked up to, my Dreamcast, things like that. That's sitting here in my bedroom on a couple of cardboard boxes, and it probably shouldn't be, because one of the cardboard boxes it's sitting on contains my Sega Genesis. And the TV, CRTs aren't light, so I'm kind of panicking, very low-key panicking, that maybe the TV is a little too heavy to be sitting on the box containing my 32X CD or whatever you want to call it. But, just gotta finish unpacking. I don't have quite as much room in this room as I was hoping. It's kind of a tiny bedroom anyway. My mom got the big bedroom for once. It's reverse. When we lived in Colorado, I actually got the biggest bedroom. I don't know why she gave it to me. Probably because it was in the basement. So, if you can imagine, the worst stereotype possible, that's who I am. I was the 30-year-old son living in my mom's basement. But, I left a lot of old stuff behind in Colorado. It's mainly just old toys that, I didn't really have a use for anymore. I'm running out of space to unpack stuff into, let's say. My desk provides, quite a bit of storage, not as much storage as I would have liked, but I have this big sort of cabinet sort of on the floor that contains probably, we'll say, most of my PS2, Xbox 360, and GameCube games. So, but it's kind of hard it's difficult to get to them because while the cabinet space is really big, the cabinet was intended to be for like a computer tower. And I don't really like the idea of putting a computer tower in this tiny little cabinet like that. So that's where all my games have gone. And like, it's this sort of thing where there are games at the back of the cabinet that I have to unload everything in front of it to get to. So that's a little annoying, especially like today I didn't unpack. I got a lot of games out of that cabinet, like Xbox 360 games. And it took me like 5-10 minutes to get everything out from the front so that I could get to stuff in the back. And it just, it's not great. I think we'll have just enough storage for everything I want to have, but some of it does have to remain in boxes. But I guess now is as good a time as any to like give you an update. What's going on with my computer? I haven't fixed it yet. I haven't called anyone to try and get it fixed. To be quite honest with you, after last month's podcast, recounting the 10 years of like having massive computer failures, we'll say every 18 months, it kind of bummed me out a little bit. It kind of like sort of gave me this feeling of like, what's the point? If I fix it, it's just going to break again. But very recently, like within the last 8 hours, let's say, a friend like really made me realize something about all this. So I've talked again earlier in this podcast, I talked about how crummy the old farmhouse I used to live in was. And thinking about it more, I think a lot of my computer problems could probably be blamed on that old farmhouse. Not only because it was, a computer room that was also a laundry room that was kind of open to the outside air in a lot of ways. Moisture could come in. We had, floods at a few points over the years. But also, like, the electrical wiring in that old place was awful. It was an old farmhouse. That was like later on it was added on to. So like you could tell that there was the old farmhouse, which comprised the living room, the kitchen, the bathroom, and one of the bedrooms. And then when they moved the farmhouse from a coal mine in like the 1900s, they moved it 2 towns over to where we lived in it. And when they moved it from the coal house further into town like that, they put an addition on it. They put that back porch, which was our laundry room, computer room, and then they put in the basement, which is where my bedroom was, where the furnace was, where a bunch of like plumbing was, things like that. And so like part of the weird wiring of this house was there were 2 breaker boxes. There was a breaker box for the old farmhouse, and then there was a breaker box for everything else. And neither of them were wired very well. Like, it was one of those things where it was very easy to trip circuit breakers. I think, and like, that's the other weird thing about the way this place was wired. Like, I just said that like one breaker box was for the farmhouse and one breaker box was for the basement and the back room, the back porch there. That's not actually true. Thinking about it now, one breaker box was for like the west side of the house, and then the other breaker box was for the east side of the house. So one of the things that happened to us rather frequently, if you ran the microwave and the toaster oven at the same time, you'd flip a breaker. You'd trip a breaker. And when that breaker would trip, it would shut off my computer. It would shut off all the lights in the basement. But all the lights in like the bedroom and the bathroom, and I think it was just the upstairs bedroom and the bathroom were fine. Maybe the living room was fine too. So it was just part of the kitchen, part of the back room, and all the basement would go off at the same time. That was how weird the wiring was in this house. And, some of the wiring was really old. Like, straight up, we had outlets catch on fire and melt in that farmhouse. We had outlets not just melt, but they weren't like properly screwed into the wall, so you could push on the outlet and it would kind of shake a little bit. Like the screw would be loose, and it being an electrical object, you don't really want to stick a screwdriver in there and tighten the screw down. There was a period of time where we couldn't actually use the light in the bathroom at all because the light switch, the screw on that became so loose that the light switch wouldn't work anymore. So, it was a very electrically challenged house, let's say. And when you're talking about computer stuff, there is a part of me that wonders if maybe the entire problem with my computer was just the bad wiring in the house, was maybe environmental factors that were, moisture trapped in the system. And then you think about the system itself. If you watched me put together my new computer, I showed my old computer, and my old computer had this hand-me-down case with a really crummy window cut into the side of it. My cousin gave me that case because he wanted to do a case mod on it. He wanted to cut out a window, and he kind of messed up the case a little bit. There was all this jagged metal, and the glass was sort of duct taped onto the case. And part of me also wonders if maybe when he was cutting that case open, if it messed up the flow of electricity. Maybe it screwed up how it grounds to the wires or whatever. Because you think about a motherboard, the motherboard screws onto the case, and you actually have to be careful when you screw on a motherboard onto the case not to screw it on too tightly, because if you do that, it'll cause electrical interference and it can blow out the motherboard. And sorry, I just bumped my microphone again. So even though I was super bummed out about all the super bad luck I've had with computers over the years, maybe it was just that old house, and realizing it was just the old house, and that the entire reason my computer broke this time was because of, a mistake I personally made. It's kind of made me a little more excited to actually fix my computer, because there's part of me that hopes that, maybe finally now that I'm away from that old farmhouse, now that I'm away from that old hand-me-down, cut-up computer case, if I fix my computer this time, maybe it'll actually last for a few years instead of just, breaking next year like it usually, I've been going through for so many years and years and years. So I think definitely sometime in the next week, maybe 2 weeks, I will finally buckle down and try to repair my computer. The only thing I'm worrying about with regards to that now, talking to friends with it just recently, some of them said maybe the power supply needs to be replaced. And, that's not a big deal. That's not going to cost me anything. I just need to probably send an email out to EVGA, the manufacturer of my power supply, and see what they say. Because EVGA power supplies come with a 10-year warranty. So when I was going through problems way back in October, I was having frame rate problems. This was before the system had a power surge and blew up. I was having other problems that turned out to be a loose case fan. They asked me, they said, do you want to just send in for a new power supply? And eventually, after we figured out it was just the loose case fan, we decided that no, I didn't need to send in for a new power supply. But I could just, right now after this podcast is over, send them an email and say, hey, I got a power surge, I need a new power supply. And, then they'll probably just ship me a new one, which, I'm starting to think is probably a smarter idea at this point. Next point on the list. I don't know if I really want to talk about this. So when we came here to Nevada, I mentioned that there was this terrible housing shortage. God, what's his name? The Tesla guy, Elon Musk. He built this gigafactory out in Reno, which is about half an hour drive from where I live. And because of workers flooding into the state to work at the gigafactory, it created this housing shortage, which made it really difficult for us to find a place to live for the first 4 months that we were in the state. I guess that housing shortage must be kind of tapering off now, because places are starting to open up. And one of the places we really wanted to move into when we came to Nevada originally was this town called Gardnerville. It's probably about a 45-minute hour drive from where we currently live. And we were told that Gardnerville was the most like where we moved from. We were moved from a suburb of Boulder, Colorado, called Lafayette. And it started as this little small town. And, as we lived there for 24, 25 years, it started to get bigger. It stopped feeling like a small town, and it started to feel closer to more like what Boulder felt like. When we first came to Nevada, we were told that Gardnerville was probably the closest to Lafayette that, we could get out here. And we actually made the drive down to Gardnerville, and, we drove around a little bit, looked around, and it seemed like a pretty pleasant little, town at the base of the mountains. I guess it's probably the Colorado Rockies, I don't know. And it seemed really nice. My mom put in an application for apartments down there, but of course, the housing shortage and everything like that, we just didn't get picked. Until probably about a week ago, they finally called us back and said, "Hey, your number's up on the waiting list. Do you want to move in?" And we're trapped where we are until November. So, that's kind of a bummer to find out, but that's just kind of the way the dice fell, I guess. Maybe when our number is up here in November, we'll be moving again. I don't know. That's just a little quick sort of twist of the knife, let's say. I'm going to take a break. I'll be back after the music to talk more about weird garbage as usual. So I'll see you guys after the break. And we're back. Hi guys, how you doing? During the break I was actually thinking about something. I wonder, with the scheduling for this podcast, I wonder if it would be better if, it was scheduled for, say, the first Monday of a new month. Regardless of whether or not I actually get paid from the podcast, maybe it would just be a better idea to, try and have this out on the first Monday of every month. But I feel like that might also put me into a weird, tough position sometimes. I don't know. It's something to think about it, at the very least. I've never really had a super hard schedule for this kind of thing, so I don't know if that'll stick, but that sounds like a good enough idea to me. So the next section in my podcast notes here, I don't think I'm really going to talk about. It was just kind of me complaining about money, and that's not really something I think anyone really wants to hear. So we'll just skip that section, and we will go directly to the next point, which I guess, at this point I guess we're still talking about creative endeavors for this month. But this kind of falls into that, and this kind of doesn't. A mod just came out for Sonic Adventure DX, and if you remember, Sonic Adventure DX can be modded to look like the Dreamcast version of Sonic Adventure, and, Sonic Adventure mods are fun. One of the mods that just came out, within the last, we'll say, couple of weeks, is called Sonic Adventure Retranslated, and this is the work of a person called Windy, I think it is, Windii. She, I guess, I don't know where she's from, but she speaks Japanese natively, and she also speaks English, and what she's been doing for a while now is going through and basically retranslating Sonic Adventure 1 and Sonic Adventure 2 to have, we'll say, better subtitles. And very recently, originally these were offered up as scripts. You could just go to her Tumblr blog or whatever and just download the raw scripts for Sonic Adventure 1 and Sonic Adventure 2. Eventually she turned them into YouTube videos where she took raw gameplay footage from Sonic Adventure 1, Sonic Adventure 2, turned off the subtitles, so subtitles don't display anymore, and then replaced them with her own subtitles. But she took her scripts and she turned them into YouTube videos. And now she's partnering up with someone else. I think it's actually her girlfriend, For those of you who are around Tumblr and Twitter, I think it's Speeps Highway, Speeps Highway, instead of Speed Highway. Turn them into actual mods for the games themselves, so that you can play through Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 with these retranslated scripts. And this is like actually important because like Sega is pretty notorious for not having very good translations, I'd say. Like to be perfectly honest, I'd put them like at number 2 next to like SNK and stuff. They don't have like tons of English in their games. But you think about games like House of the Dead 2 and how like super goofy that translation was. And I feel like a lot of Sega games kind of have translation quality around the quality of House of the Dead 2. Like, you know, you think about Shenmue. Shenmue has like the actual dialogue in Shenmue is mostly fine. It's mostly the voice acting that's crappy in Shenmue, and Sonic Adventure and Sonic Adventure 2 kind of get the worst of both worlds, and especially Sonic Adventure 2 has just absolutely terrible translation and absolutely terrible voice acting. And I think Ryan Drummond has, gone on record to say exactly why this is. It was Sega didn't really have a voice director, and like they kind of had a voice director, but he didn't really speak native English. So it was kind of, they were just handed scripts with all their lines in order, we'll say. No, I'm sorry. I'm going to pause this podcast for a second. I'm going to go close my window because not only do we have trucks pulling up outside, but someone has a squeaky belt on their car that it's probably picking up on the microphone. Okay. Window closed. But, like I was saying before I left, Sonic Adventure 2 has, I feel, a pretty notoriously bad translation. Ryan Drummond has talked about the working conditions for the voice actors. They weren't allowed to record together in a group. If you've ever seen, like, behind-the-scenes footage for, like, modern cartoon shows, like, we'll say Steven Universe, DuckTales, animated movies that Disney makes, things like that, usually the voice actors will be in the studio together, and they will record their lines as if they are conversing with real characters. So, like, Sonic will be talking directly to Tails, and, in the case of a Sonic game. But in the case of Sonic Adventure 2, everyone recorded their lines in isolation. They were not allowed to see each other's lines. They didn't know who they were responding to. They didn't know the context of the scenes. They were just given a list of lines to read off one by one. And, on top of that, Sonic Adventure 2 just has terrible translation in general. You have a lot of English-speaking characters saying, like, Japanese onomatopoeias, I guess you'd call them. Like, the way they call out attacks, the way Eggman says Yosh, things like that. Those are very Japanese turns of phrases that shouldn't exist in an English script. And like a lot of it, like I've talked about how terrible Sonic Adventure 2 story is before in general, and that's also part of, I assumed it was partially because of how terrible the translation was, but basically, Wendy's scripts endeavor to resolve at least some of these issues so that you can, get more of the flavor of the storyline to come through. And the reason why I'm bringing this up now is because this is one of those things where, like, this kind of makes me feel like a jerk in a way. One of the things that I'm, like, weirdly passionate about is translation quality. I don't know, like, if any of you out there have ever dabbled in, like, fan translations before. We're talking, like, fan translations of video games, even, like, fan translations of anime or manga, things like that. You'll typically run into what is called, like, a very literal translation. It's kind of sort of on the border of, like, the old Death Note meme of just according to Keikaku. It's kind of on the edge of that, but not quite as dumb as that. But it's people who basically, like, all this is divided up into two camps. There's localization and then there's translation. Localization, the job of a localizer is to make it sound natural in a native language. A translator is there to just convert the text from one language to another. And translation is something that I don't really like. I understand why it exists, but, too often I've run into, let's say, a translation hack for an old Super Nintendo game, and it'll just have, really stiff translation. It'll be obviously directly translated from Japanese to English without any regard for how sentence structure or how dialogue flows in English. And I bring this up in the context of Wendy's Sonic Adventure Retranslated project because, bless her heart, she kind of suffers from that a little bit. Not as badly as some, I'd say her text is still pretty readable, but it does come off a little stiff sometimes. It does come off a little hard to read. The classic example I always go back to for any sort of, I don't want to say bad fan translation because that would be an insult to her work, and I don't want to insult her work, but if you ever saw the Powerpuff Girls episode where it's like a rainy day outside and Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup are trying really hard to find things to do while it's raining outside. It's been a long time since I've seen Powerpuff Girls, you guys. But there's this sequence where Bubbles reveals she reads this manga series called Super Bunny Adventures or something, and she reads some passages from it because apparently Bubbles can just read Japanese, and it's this really hilarious, super dry translation, and it's really funny, but it's also really true to certain fan translations where the sentence structure just doesn't work in English, and that's the example I always go back to. Where, someone's oh, an obstacle is evident. I have a solution. Or something like that. I'll probably, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to splice in the clip because thankfully someone out there was smart enough to just rip this one very specific scene and post it on YouTube. So I'm just going to splice that in right here, right now. Because all you need to know is the audio. You don't even really need to see the visual. So here's that Powerpuff Girls clip.
のかわいい冒険物語 In English! Oh, sorry. The great fun-time adventures of Bunny Bunny and Friends! Walrus, an obstacle is evident. Whoa! Why wasn't shifting your decision? Being a rock, I am without movement. I am filled with solutions.
And, with this Powerpuff Girls sort of, translation, that's kind of the feeling I get from Wendy's Sonic Adventure Retranslated, unfortunately. And the entire reason I bring this up, not to diss on Wendy, because I think she did a very good job, and I'm thankful that her project exists. But, I've been trying to say is that this is a pet peeve of mine. And the reason why I'm bringing it up, I keep trying to get to the point and I keep diverting, is for a long time now, one of the things I've wanted to do was offer to fix a script like that. We'll say a manga series or something like that. But the problem is getting in contact with the original translator, explaining yourself adequately, and then usually with a manga series or an anime, or even just most of the fan-translated games out there are RPGs. So we're talking hundreds of pages of a script, maybe even thousands of pages of a script. And that's not really something I would undertake. But with Wendy's Sonic Adventure Retranslated, Sonic Adventure doesn't really have very much dialogue in it. I think it comes out, if you put all the cutscenes back to back to back, it probably comes out to around maybe an hour and a half of cutscene. You can look up Sonic Adventure the movie on YouTube, and it's probably around an hour, maybe 2 hours of cutscene. So that's something that, for someone like me, is pretty manageable. So I extended an olive branch to Wendy, and I said, hey, do you want me to do this? I really want to do it. I really, really want to do it. I want to make this sound like natural English, like the actual translation that would be put into a released retail game, not this slightly stilted sort of dialogue. Actually, here, hang on. If I back out of my podcast notes here in Google Docs on my tablet here, what I can actually do is I can load up her script because I copied it to Google Docs like over a year ago. Those of you who you may remember that I posted about this on Tumblr where I actually asked her and I said, hey, I'd really like to fix this if you'd let me. So let's load up the hero story document. And she's quick to point out that the document has evolved since then. Like I said before, she's working with her, I think it's her girlfriend, to, both clean up the script a little bit. They have done some work to it. And also to get it actually put into the game itself. So let's load up the hero story here, and we'll find a particularly weird line that I have a problem with. Okay, so here's the cutscene where we first get introduced to Knuckles the Echidna and Rouge the Bat. So the first line from Rouge, you may remember, maybe I'll splice in a clip here. In the English dub, she says,
"Just let it go. You just don't know when to give up, do you?"
What are you talking about? That emerald's mine. You got that? The Master Emerald contains special powers that neutralize the energy of the Chaos Emeralds. That makes it very powerful. What the?
And in Wendy's translation here, it's actually a much longer line. It's, whew, just give it up already, you stubborn bonehead. You're the one who's stealing from me, so what are you talking about? That Master Emerald has the important role of preventing the Chaos Emeralds from going out of control. It feels a little overwritten. It feels a little stilted. So I said, hey, I'd really like to fix this. And unfortunately, the reason why I'm bringing it up now is because with the release of the Sonic Adventure Retranslated mod for Sonic Adventure DX, and the reveal that she's working with her girlfriend on this, I have been denied. So I can't actually apparently touch this script, and so much so that Wendy actually took the script down. She does not offer these scripts up for viewing anymore. The only way you can read these scripts is by watching her videos. And that kind of bums me out on so many different levels that I cannot even begin to tell you. Because, that's... Like, I have these old outdated scripts for Sonic Adventure 2 now, and some of them are actually half done, because if you remember, from a year ago, before she actually started to, work with her girlfriend and get this all inputted into the game itself, she did actually offer the scripts up for download, and she actually kind of gave me the green light to go through and retouch all these back up again, to make them into slightly more readable, more natural English. So, I've done some work on the Sonic Adventure 2 script to make it more readable, and now she's telling me kind of to a polite way of saying screw off. And, to be fair, the other reason why I wanted to bring this up is because, like I said, I think I kind of came off as kind of a jerk to her. I probably came off as kind of a jerk just now trying to explain my reasoning, because it really sounds like I'm dunking on her work, and I don't want that. I don't want it to seem like that. I think what she's doing is incredibly important. I think that's the entire reason why I want to work with her, That's why I want to clean this up for myself, is because I think this is important work. I think it's worth doing correctly. And she probably got this probably around 80% of the way there, and some of the lines just don't entirely read right to me. And, I was given the thumbs up a year ago, last January, to, go ahead, go through, clean up the script. And, I ended up getting busy with moving and everything. And now it's now I'm in a position where I kind of want to help her. It's an easy thing to go through and just look at the line and say, okay, this is a weird way of formatting this. I'll rewrite it to be a little bit more natural. And now I can't do that. And that's a bummer. And, I wish them the best of the luck. Best of the luck, yes. See, I can speak English good. I am a very good Englisher. But it's a bummer all around in a way, because it's good that the mod is coming out. You can download it on YouTube. I'll probably put it in the show notes. I'll put a link somewhere so you guys can go find it and go download it and see it for yourself. But it's just one of those things where it's I think about, okay, when I get my computer fixed, maybe I'll stream this Sonic Adventure Retranslated mod. And then I played about 5 minutes of it just to see what it was like, and it was like, oh no, I can't stream this because all I'm going to do the entire stream is complain about it, and I can't do that. I can't be that rude to her. But it's this weird pet peeve of mine still that, I have to fix this. I want to fix this. I want it to read like natural English, not like a translation. And in a certain way, I kind of get the impression that maybe Wendy is one of those translation, not localization sort of people. And it's a big mess that I've kind of made for myself. And, I know she's not listening to this podcast. I know Speeps isn't listening to this podcast. But regardless, if this ever does make it out to any of them, I am sorry for unintentionally coming off like a jerk, because that's definitely the vibe I was getting from her, in the, Sonic Adventure retranslated thread just a few days ago. It was this kind of almost passive aggressive hostility, like they wanted me to stop talking about it. So I did. I said, okay, I can take the message. I'll get out of here. And yet here I am on my podcast whining about it like a big jerk. Ooh, that's not a good look. But, yeah, that was something that was very nearly another project to be put on my plate, was going through and fixing up a script for Sonic Adventure. I guess the original Sonic Adventure is where I would have started, but I do have an entire complete cleaned up script for the hero story of Sonic Adventure 2 now. So, and part of the final story, but that's not going to be, I guess. Part of me does wonder if maybe I should just ask her about making my own, personal variation of the script, let their original translated version stand, and then maybe build upon their work and release a separate version where the script is a little bit cleaned up. That sometimes happens on romhacking.net. There are translation hacks for translation hacks that go through and clean up someone else's script a little bit. But, I don't know if it'd be cool to snipe their work like that either. It probably wouldn't be, to be fair. So maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should just let cooler heads prevail and just let them do their work. Ooh, I guess that's all for talking about creative endeavors. Now we just talk about things I've been, doing, video games I've been playing, movies I've been watching. I haven't been watching any movies. I haven't been really reading much. For those of you who remember, I was trying to go back through and reread the original Dragon Ball. Well, I say reread the original Dragon Ball. I was reading it for the first time. I am kind of familiar with Dragon Ball, the original, but I'd never read the manga, and, the original Dragon Ball was on Toonami so long ago, I didn't see all the episodes. I kind of tapered off after the first tournament. So, reading the manga was kind of like this thing that I always wanted to do, and I finally was starting to do it, and, I sort of go back and forth working on that a little bit. I guess before we get too far away from creative projects, work continues on that secret game I was talking about last month. Work continues on that Hidden Palace Zone level. You may have noticed that I posted a Patreon exclusive video for that Hidden Palace Zone. It goes through everything that was done in Act 1 up to that point. That's a fun watch, kind of, I think. It's weird how long it's actually turning out to be. I think where the levels end, where the two disparaging paths, where the two different paths end in that video, I should probably bring the two paths together and end the level shortly after that, because it's getting kind of long, and you don't want Sonic levels that are more than, say, 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, probably 3 or 4 minutes at the most. But getting back to creative things, or getting off of creative things and onto media I have consumed. I mentioned earlier that I got the Xbox 360 hooked back up, and man, that is a weird thing to deal with. I have a fat Xbox 360. I have the original, not the original, it's not like a launch model or anything, but it's before they made the slim version. So it's it's the big one with the hard drive. Well, they all have hard drives, but it's the weird, the curved one with the flap for the USB thingies. I don't even know what a slim Xbox looks like if I'm just describing a slim Xbox. But it's one of the original models of Xbox. And two things. Number one, that thing is so loud. Like, you forget how loud an original Xbox 360 is. It sounds like I'm running a vacuum cleaner in my bedroom. Like, that thing, how did anyone tolerate that thing back in the day? Like, maybe it's getting louder because it's older. I don't know. Like, that thing, my original Xbox 360 that I bought in November 2006 red-ringed. So this one is from February 2007, I think. Maybe it's from a little bit later. Because I've gone through 3 Xbox 360s in my life. There was the first one I got in November that red-ringed in like December. I got a new one in February that was also acting up. And that one red-ringed shortly after, maybe sometime late 2007, early 2008. And then from then on, that's the Xbox 360 I've had. So you figure this Xbox 360 is at least 10 years old. So it is showing its age. The controller is showing its age. Oh my gosh. The analog sticks on that thing are so loose. The right stick's like really crunchy. It's kind of a nightmare. And the other like major problem with my Xbox 360 is the DVD tray. It reads discs just fine as far as I can tell, but the real problem is actually getting the tray to slide out. For some reason, I think the motor inside is starting to burn out. So you'll hit the eject button and it won't come out. You'll have to hit the eject button like 4 or 5 different times, and eventually, like, you'll maybe have to like wedge a fingernail in there to manually pull it out. That's like, I'm genuinely worried that one of these times I'm going to put a game into the Xbox 360 and I'm never going to get it back out again. Which has like other implications on it. Last month I was talking about, all the videos I wanted to do, and actually, come to think of it, those aren't in my notes here. The results of that poll I was, putting up last month. We'll get to that. Hopefully I won't forget by the time this podcast is over. We'll cover that at the very, very end. But I mentioned all the videos I wanted to do. The 2 Sonic Mania, Sonic Forces video review, the Nights into Dreams documentary I have scripted out, the Jurassic Park video review I have scripted out, and then like 3 or 4 or 5, probably way more than that, like bits and pieces of scripts that I've started and need to finish. And one of the things that's on there that I didn't talk about, before I moved to Nevada, one of the things I actually started, the thing I wanted to run while I was absent from my computer, absent from the internet, I wanted to do like a preview run of the Patreon reward of the Sonic Unleashed Let's Play. I figured that, maybe if I gave an example of what the Sonic Unleashed Let's Play was going to look and sound like, maybe that would entice more people to donate to my Patreon. And before we left, I actually recorded like an hour and a half of Sonic Unleashed with the plan of writing out scripts for things I wanted to say during the episode, special features I wanted to like highlight in the engine or in the game or, whatever else, because what I wanted to do with that Let's Play, if you've ever seen the Research Indicates Let's Play for Jurassic Park Trespasser, I wanted to do something like that, this kind of really informative, picture-in-a-picture sort of technical breakdown, not of just the game, but of like the media surrounding the game, the franchise, things like that. And I recorded an hour and a half of footage. I think it was up to either the first or second boss. And there just wasn't enough time to write the scripts, get it all recorded and edited and put out. There was a point where I realized there was no way I was going to be done in time. So I scrapped that idea. I still have the footage on my computer hard drive, my desktop hard drive, waiting to just have scripts written for it. That was another thing. But if my Xbox 360, if the tray breaks, then that kind of kills those plans. The original plan was that I just put Sonic Unleashed into the tray and then never take Sonic Unleashed out again. And earlier tonight I broke that rule. So, who knows what the future holds. But got the 360 hook backed up. It's loud. My controller's old. It takes like 2 minutes to load because I've filled up an entire 200 gigabyte hard drive. It's an old system. You can feel the age of that system. But one of the games I played on my Xbox 360 was Cars 2, the video game. And I kind of made a joke of it on Twitter. I said, I just beat Cars 2 on the Xbox 360. Ask me anything. And the very first question I got was, why? And the entire reason I played Cars 2 is because actually those Cars games aren't bad. I played the original Cars on the GameCube. There was like a PC demo way back in the day, but I've played most of it on the GameCube at this point. They're decent racing games, like straight up. Disney did not lowball those games. They did not cheap out on those games just because they were licensed. Whether or not how you feel about the Cars franchise doesn't really matter. They are solid, if easy, racing games. And that's true of Cars 2. The only real problems I have with Cars 2 is that it kind of feels a little bit too kiddie. I hate that term. I hate calling things kiddie. But it does feel a little bit like it was tuned for really young children. And that makes sense. It's a kid's game, whatever. But what really bugs me is how they sort of implemented this kidification, if you want to call it that. And that's that the game is actually really slow. Cars 1 on the GameCube, it's not like F-Zero fast or anything ridiculous like that, but it has a pretty decent sense of speed once you get out there in Radiator Springs or whatever you want to call it. And Cars 2 is a lot slower, a lot slower. You feel like you never top out past 30 or 40 miles per hour in that game. You want to talk about slow games. This game is slower than Mario Kart. You think about Mario Kart on 50cc, and that's probably around where Cars 2 sits, but even then, I think 50cc in Mario Kart 8 is faster feeling than Cars 2. It is a tremendously slow feeling game, and part of that is also because Cars 2, I think they were trying to be cinematic, so it has really extreme motion blur, even though you're going really, really slow. So it accentuates the feeling of slowness 1,000 times more, because, the world is streaking by you with all this motion blur, and you're just kind of putzing along real slow and it's whoa, that's terrible. And the other thing that really makes it feel like a game intended for very small children is how it handles resetting you back onto the track. So, this is another one of those pet peeves of mine. I like it when racing games just let you have full control over your car. They let you drive backwards, they let you drive off the track, whatever else. And, as we've moved forward, I guess, with online games and whatever, games more and more automatically reset you if you get too far off the track. If you drive backwards, that's not allowed. And not only are those things not allowed in Cars 2, but if you bump into a wall at any kind of reasonable speed, you're automatically reset on the track. You can just bump the wall very gently, and the game will say, whoa, 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 and it'll reset you back to the middle of the track. If it wasn't for those two things, Cars 2 would actually be a really very enjoyable game, but that's not to say it wasn't enjoyable. It was just a little more sedate than I think I was hoping for. It's more sedate than Cars 1. It's more sedate than Mario Kart. It's still a pretty enjoyable game. It's just, don't really expect much from it. Cars 2 is also... It's also not much of a racing game. Cars 1 is just a straight-up racing game. It has a trick system, kind of like SSX in a way, that you learn, way further into the game than probably is necessary. But there is this trick system in Cars 1 that you use to build up a boost meter. And that stuff is in Cars 2, but they've turned it into kind of a kart racer. Now there's weapon pickups and, all the other cars are shooting at you all the time. And that's fine, but more often than not, what they use the weapon system for are kind of these non-racing diversions, arena battle modes, kind of like a horde mode, wave-based survival is what I'm trying to think of. There are a lot of wave-based survival events in Cars 2 in the single player mode that are like a real drag. And sometimes you'll get like 2-3 of them in a row. And it's just like, ugh, that's not what I came to this game for. I came to the game for racing. And, it was fine. I enjoy it. I didn't hate the purchase. I think I spent like $4 on it last Black Friday, like Black Friday 2016. So, it was fine. I don't hate it. It just could have been a lot better. And from what I understand, Cars 3, that just came out, like the video game adaptation of it. And Cars 2 was made by Avalanche Studios. After Cars 2, they went on to do the video game adaptation for Toy Story 3, which had the Toy Box mode. And then the Toy Box mode in Toy Story 3 became Disney Infinity. And Avalanche did 3 Disney Infinity games before being shut down. And then Disney shut down all their game development, and Warner Brothers hired Avalanche to do a third Cars game. And from what I understand, all Avalanche did was reuse the engine from Cars 2 and just made another really slow, crummy, not really crummy, but average kart racer with it. But if I had to attach a grade to Cars 2 for the Xbox 360, I'd probably give it like a B-, maybe a C+. I've been really fighting to finish Ocarina of Time 3D for the 3DS. I bought that game in 2016 after just really jonesing for Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I was like, oh, I want a Zelda game to play. So I bought Ocarina of Time 3D for the 3DS, and I probably played a little over halfway through that game. I think I played it up to a little bit after the Fire Temple. I think it was the Fire Temple or the Ice Cave. I think I might have been trying to find the Ice Cave when Breath of the Wild actually came out. And then, of course, Breath of the Wild ate up 300 hours of my life, and I sort of forgot about Ocarina of Time 3D. And I think I talked about this last month, about finally forcing myself to go back to the game and finish it. And, I had to do the Ice Cave, I had to do the Water Temple. And I don't know if it's just because of playing Breath of the Wild or if just the back half of Ocarina of Time is boring. But man, I had a real hard time forcing myself to play that game. After Breath of the Wild, Ocarina of Time really doesn't seem like anything special anymore. The world is really small, it's really rigidly defined, and the real bummer is when... So, Ocarina of Time has the time travel gimmick, right? You either start out as young Link or you jump forward 7 years to adult Link. And, which is weird when you think about it. How young is young Link for 7 years to make him an adult? Was he he'd have to be 13 as young Link, which I guess that's young. I don't know. That's probably splitting hairs. But... So you have the time travel mechanic, right? And when you become Adult Link, the first 2 or 3 or 4 dungeons are Adult Link exclusive. And then as you round the final corner coming into the end of the game, they're like, hey, what if we had you do dungeons as both young Link and old Link? So you end up with dungeons where you get to the dungeon as Adult Link, you have to come back to the dungeon as young Link, and then you have to come back to the dungeon again as old Link. And that is incredibly tedious. And they put a stealth segment towards the end of the game. That's incredibly tedious. I soft locked the game at one point during the Gerudo Desert stealth mission because I ended up hookshotting into a place where the Gerudo lady couldn't come to progress the trigger or anything, and it felt like such a slog to get through the end of that game. It wasn't just the Water Temple. The Shadow Temple wasn't very good. The Spirit Temple wasn't very good. Was it the Spirit Temple? The one in the Gerudo Desert? That was the Shadow Temple. Then what was at the bottom of the well? Was that even a temple? I don't know. It had to be. I don't know. But that game, I don't want to say it sucks, because it doesn't suck, but... maybe I just needed more distance between it and Breath of the Wild to really go back to it. But, man, I did not enjoy the end of Ocarina of Time 3D. But the good news is I'm done with it. I never have to look at that game again. And I will say this, even though the last 2 or 3 dungeons of Ocarina felt like such a drag, I do like big endings, and Ocarina has a very good big ending. The final fights with Ganon are all amazing. You know, you still get that scene where he stabs him through the head at the end of the game. Then you get this, like, really wonderful credits montage where you see, like, all of Hyrule celebrating Link's victory. And that is, I really like that. I really like games that show you not just people celebrating that you saved the world, but like extended celebrations. That was one of the things that I really loved about the end of Earthbound, was just how long it kind of lets you marinate in your victory. You get almost like a victory lap in Earthbound after you beat the game, where you get to, like, you could, if you really wanted to, revisit every location in the game, and every NPC, well, almost every NPC, has brand new dialogue after you finish the game, talking about you defeating the final boss. And that is incredible. And Ocarina of Time doesn't go quite that far, but it does have a big end game celebration that just, it gives you the warm and fuzzies, and it makes you feel really, really good. Like, so now that I'm like free of Ocarina of Time 3D, I'm finally open to trying a new portable game, which I've really wanted to try. I wanted to start something else for so many months now, and what it really came down to was I could either start Mother 3 or I could start Final Fantasy 6. And a few days ago I finally broke down and I started Final Fantasy 6. Nothing really important there to report. I've probably played about an hour of the game. I actually played some of it during the break here. I just got through Figaro. I recruited Edgar. For some reason I was thinking Andrew in my mind's eye, but I just recruited Edgar. We're going to meet the returners. We're going to meet Bannon. I almost said Baron. But, you know, I'm not really going to say much about Final Fantasy VI at this point, because, yeah, not only, like, is it like a super old game, but I actually, probably like 10 or 11, maybe 12, 13 years ago, I did try and start Final Fantasy VI. For those of you who don't know, I've never played Final Fantasy VI, though I'm just about to invalidate that by saying, you know, all these years ago, I did start the game and I played about 3, 4, 5 hours of the game, up to the point, so there's a point in Final Fantasy VI, there's probably multiple points where this happened, I seem to remember this, where your party splits up. You get this really big party of like 12 people, and then there's this sequence on like a waterfall where you're on a raft, and the raft sort of breaks apart and everyone goes their separate ways, and, you know, you have all like these little episodes for, you know, what Group A is doing, what Group B is doing. You know, there's a phantom train, there's a wild boy, and eventually you reach a point where the party rejoins back together again. And when I played this, probably back in like 2005, 2006, maybe 2004, I made it to the point where the party split apart and then came back together again. And I think that's probably around the 4-hour mark. It was right when Terra did a thing. I'm not going to say what it is, because, you know, I respect spoilers, even though I just told you how Ocarina of Time ends, but Terra does a thing, and that was right around where I quit. And I've never played Final Fantasy VI since then. That was a very long time ago that I got to that point, so most of this game is like still a total mystery to me. I have done well enough to where, keep bumping the microphone. I keep bumping like the pop filter, but anyway, I've done well enough to where I know some vague elements of the Final Fantasy VI storyline. I know certain things about, like, rude things Kefka does. I think when I played the game way back when, I think I got to the point where he poisons the river? That sounds right? And I know there's a wedding scene, and I know that there's a point where the world gets destroyed and like the whole world map changes. But that is the extent. I've just told you everything I know about Final Fantasy VI. Oh, and also there's something weird about the ninja guy Shadow. That's Boom, that's all I know. So this is going to be a fun time playing through Final Fantasy VI for what is basically the first time. And like one of the cool things playing it just now here on the break, I'm starting to get that feeling from it, you know? It's a feeling I haven't felt from a Final Fantasy game probably since the first time I played Final Fantasy VII. Like, it gives me those sort of, I guess it's like a form of nostalgia. It gives me that kind of feeling where it's just like, oh yeah, I like this world. I like these characters. The story's moving maybe a little bit too fast. Like, Edgar is just like, yeah, I love Terra. Let's escape. You've known me for 10 minutes. Let's bury my castle in the sand and escape it by chocobo. Like, that's a little quick there, buddy. But, you know, I'm not really going to argue. That's probably for the best. I'm probably more used to like modern Final Fantasy pacing where you have 20-hour tutorials and I'd take probably a faster story at this point that moves a little bit faster. Especially after like Final Fantasy V. I played most of that a couple of years ago, and that game ended up boring me a lot. I never finished Final Fantasy V, and I don't really plan on to. And I blame that, again, this is going back to fan translations. I played the fan-translated version of Final Fantasy V instead of the Game Boy Advance version. And I think part of the reason I got so bored with Final Fantasy V is because I played the fan translation. Some of the dialogue in that version of the game was a little bad. It was a little stiff. It didn't really read naturally. It didn't really like communicate emotion very well. And I've been told that I should have played the Game Boy Advance version because the dialogue alone is a lot better in that version. It probably would have been a lot more fun for me to play through. But, you know, maybe I'll go back and maybe I'll play Final Fantasy V on the Game Boy Advance one day. It's not impossible. But I got pretty far into Final Fantasy V when I played the fan-translated version. I played pretty far. I played like 25 hours of Final Fantasy V. So, you know, there's little incentive for me to replay all of that. But like I said, maybe the Game Boy Advance version would be better. The Game Boy Advance version of Final Fantasy VI so far is fantastic. It's kind of a hacked version. It leaves the script alone, but it restores the colors to the way they looked on the Super Nintendo. And, you know, it looks the way it does on the Super Nintendo. And I have this nice backlit Game Boy Advance clone hardware, the K101 Revo that I'm playing it on. It is a good time. I could talk about playing Midnight Club Los Angeles on the Xbox 360, but I won't because, frankly, that's kind of boring. It's just an open world street racer. You don't need me to ramble on about how weird that game feels because it's kind of got this feeling like I'm going to talk about it anyway, apparently. It's kind of got this feeling of like a fake video game you'd see in an episode of like Law and Order, or a fake video game you'd see in a movie, where parts of it look way too good, parts of it still kind of look like a PlayStation 2 game. It came out the same year as Grand Theft Auto 4, so maybe it was like this weird transitionary game for Rockstar, where maybe it started as like a PS2 game and then they updated it to run on the Xbox 360. I don't know, but it's weird. It's got weird dialogue. The cutscenes kind of feel like they were made in Source Filmmaker. I don't know. It's weird, but it's sort of enjoyable. There seems to be a lot to do, and like part of the reason I like racing games is because you can just kind of, it's something like good to play when you're listening to a podcast or watching, like when you have a YouTube video that you don't really have to pay attention to when you're just listening to like a Let's Play or something. That's what racing games are really good for, and that seems to be what Midnight Club 2, or Midnight Club LA rather, is really good for. The final game I want to talk about is Mighty Number 9. Oh yes, that is a PlayStation Plus game this month, which means that I finally get to play Mighty Number 9 without technically really spending money on it. Mighty Number 9, huh? I guess the thing that I want to say about Mighty Number 9 is that actually, the game doesn't really seem to be as bad as I was led to believe. Don't get me wrong, Mighty Number 9 is not a really great game, but the main issue I seem to have with Mighty Number 9 is that it's stuck in this weird kind of limbo where it feels like a really, we'll say like AAA game. Like it feels like the kind of game you'd expect Capcom to put out, right? Or like Sega or Namco. It feels like it should be this really high quality, polished release that they didn't have enough time or money to actually like finish and properly polish up. It feels, like it falls short of that. But at the same time, Mighty Number 9 also feels like the sort of game that had too much money to have kind of like indie charm, if you know what that means. Like, indie games can feel cheap, but that can be part of their charm, right? Like, you feel like a developer is trying really, really hard to have a high quality experience, and maybe they're not exactly getting to where they need to go, and that in a way can be kind of charming, almost sort of like Deadly Premonition, or I can't even, like Terraria kind of has that feeling. Early Minecraft had that feeling, kind of. Shovel Knight. It's this kind of feeling, the indie charm, where you can forgive maybe some shortcomings because it feels like the developer is trying really hard. And Mighty Number 9 doesn't have either of those feelings. It's not polished enough to be an expensive professional game, but it has too much money to have indie charm. And it's just stuck in the middle, and it just feels like crap from both sides of the scale, basically. Like, the controls are way more responsive than I figured. The level design is fine. The difficulty balancing could be better. It's a little unclear sometimes what will kill you, what is safe to walk on, things like that. And just, like, the main thing is just how boring it feels to play. It's not, like, offensively bad, it's just bland. It's like the video game equivalent of eating unflavored, unsweetened oatmeal. But also, like, the thing about it that is, like, actually really genuinely bad are the visuals. This is probably one of the ugliest games I've ever played. That's not to say, like, the art direction is ugly. I think the art itself is probably, like, really good, but it looks worse than a mobile game. It looks worse than a PS2 game. Like, it is staggering how ugly Mighty Number 9 is. And, like, one of the things that I think is, like, super telling about Mighty Number 9, so you have something I've talked about before, are, like, how fans kind of get obsessed with fixing games, right? You have, like, a bad racing game like Fuel by Codemasters, which is this open world post-apocalypse video game that, didn't turn out very well. It was kind of crap. You have a fan mod that tries to fix it. Stalker, Call of Pripyat, that is missing a bunch of features from a beta that leaked. You have a fan mod that tries to fix that. You have fan mods that try and fix broken games. And there's a famous mod for Aliens Colonial Marines that, rebalances all the difficulty, re-implements all these missing graphical effects, things like that. And there isn't a mod like that for Mighty Number 9. Like, nobody wants to fix this game. It's gonna be crap forever. Nobody cares enough about it. And I think that says a lot about Mighty Number 9, that people were so upset by this game that nobody's even gonna try and fix it. The developer isn't gonna try and fix it. Fans aren't going to try and fix it. And, like, this is an Unreal Engine game. The tools are out there. People could edit maps. They could inject new shaders. They could fix character models. It would be really easy to do that. And they aren't. And I think that says everything you need to know about Mighty Number 9. But that's the end of my notes there, talking, like, dumping on Mighty Number 9. I'm glad I didn't technically pay money for that game. So, that's the end of the podcast. I will talk now about the poll results I put forth last month. I wanted to know what direction I should go forward from here, whether or not I should keep working on Overbite, or whether or not I should focus on just diving super deep into doing YouTube videos. And the thing that really bums me out about all this is that I never really got a clear answer. Nobody ever really left comments saying definitively one way or the other. Well, some people did. A couple people did. I think I got one comment on Patreon, and I got 1 or 2 comments on the YouTube version that gave me definitive answers. And usually the answer was, I don't know, man, it's whatever you want. And that's not the answer I was looking for. And I did have one patron, Setsune Waifel, who kind of gave me a truth hurts sort of thing, where he said that I usually just tend to follow my gut and that these poll results don't matter. And that was one of those things that was like, oh, he's right. Like, but that's not a good feeling to have. So I don't know what to do. The reason why I ask is because I really could just go either way. Like, since that poll went up, I've been thinking about Overbite really, really hard. And the major prevailing answer I got from more than one patron, like my cousin told me this too, was that I could do YouTube videos about Overbite, progress update videos, like video blogs, vlogs, if you want to call them that. And that is something I guess I could do, but I don't like that idea. For one, I don't like the idea of just giving away the entire game through vlogs. It would be a good way to promote the game, get me wrong, but I don't think my YouTube audience would be super into that. I think the YouTube audience I have right now was gained through editorial videos, through criticism videos, video reviews, things like my definitive Sonic Adventure video, glitch montages, things like that. I don't think they're really going to translate well to vlogs about indie game development. It would be nice if they would, and that's something that if I do end up going down the Overbite path, I probably will do a few of those, but I just don't want to give the game away like that, and I don't think my audience would be very into it. So, I don't know, man. I want to work on Overbite. That's part of the reason, again, I've been in kind of a crummy mood lately because I've been working on that Hidden Palace Zone level I mentioned last month. And it's just one of those things where, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, oh man, I should be working on Overbite. What am I doing? Why am I wasting time with this fan game level? And it's like, I want to finish the fan game level, but I also... it's a big pain in the butt. So, I don't know. I guess the takeaway is I'll just follow my gut. But that is the end of this podcast. I really need to stop doing super long podcasts. Even if I have a lot of things to talk about. I don't know. Do you guys mind long podcasts? I do. I don't like super long podcasts. I haven't listened to the Giant Bombcast in 4 or 5 years at this point because, man... they put out 3 and 4 hour podcasts, and that sucks. I'm not listening to a 4-hour podcast. I'm not listening to a 3-hour podcast. I'm not even really going to listen to a 2-hour podcast at this point, because I have other things I could be doing with my time. I have YouTube videos I could be watching. You want to talk about a first world problem. My YouTube Watch Later playlist probably has over 400 videos at this point, because I thought I was going to be without internet for weeks and months, so I downloaded all this stuff to watch while I thought I wouldn't have internet. And now I'm stuck watching this backlog of videos I've downloaded while also trying to juggle stuff on my YouTube subscription feed, and I have all this video in my Watch Later playlist that stacked up over the months while I was at my brother's place, and it's a big giant mess, and I have so much video to watch, and I need to go through my Watch Later playlist and delete a bunch of stuff I'll never watch, and that just doesn't leave any time for podcasts, including this podcast, which I'm going to end now before it gets any longer. Thank you all for listening. I'll see you guys in April. And hopefully, finally, for real this time, I'll actually be podcasting from my desktop again. Fingers crossed, and I'll see you guys in April.